Good morning, everybody. I figured I'd do a little bit on the Constitution and its, well, its application, but also why it doesn't apply, when it does apply, try to clear some things up, because I'm meeting a lot of people who are new to this stuff, and they're having trouble wrapping their heads around everything because there's so much out there. There's conflicting information, there's overload of information, there's misinformation. So if I can help clear some things up, at least from my experience and my perspective, that's what I'd like to try to do here. So let's get to talking about that. The Constitution is not the only Constitution that we have here in the United States of America. There is quite a few. You've got the Northwest Ordinance. This is going backwards. The Northwest Ordinance, the Articles of Confederation. The Declaration of Independence is it's a declaration, obviously. Not quite a constitution like the Articles of Confederation and the Northwest Ordinance. Okay, these are all contracts, by the way. So you have, if you look at the succession of events that took place by a body of people creating a government, it started with the Declaration of Independence, right? People declared their independence. And from there, they said, okay, well, we've got to form some kind of structure. We've got to have some bylaws for our society, for our government. So they formed the Articles of Confederation, right? Which created a confederacy of sovereign states or sovereign nations bound together, which created a federal type of structure. Okay, and then they did the Northwest Ordinance, which created territories of the federal government. Okay, then they went into the Constitution. The Constitution didn't do away with those other three documents. They are still at play and they're still being used. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Northwest Ordinance are all still viable, and the Constitution doesn't supersede any of that. It actually amends them, so to speak. So it didn't do away with anything. That's why we've had, quite a few presidents before Washington, but of course they're not going to teach us that, because then we might know how things actually really work. So along comes the War of Independence. They do that, the Declaration of Independence, then they have the war. Then from there, okay, they form these governments. They're bankrupt. They don't have any money. So Washington was a big proponent of that. When they asked him about the Constitution and why they needed a Constitution, his two words were no money. Okay, so the Constitution was formed essentially as a bankruptcy trust document or agreement. It's all it is. It's a bankruptcy trust document. Let's not twist it and make it this glorious thing. It's a bankruptcy trust agreement so they could operate in the world commerce. That's really at its very simplest level, that's what it is. So let's not get it twisted. You just have to understand how the parties in that trust lay out, right? So that's important, very important. If you read the preamble, it clearly says, we the people of the United States. Well, who is the United States? Because in the preamble, it uses the term United States in the beginning, we the people of the United States, and then in the very end, it says, of the United States of America. let me read it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So there you have it. A group of people called themselves the United States and established a constitution for the rest of us. Woohoo! You know, who gave them the authority to do that? You know, these are some real egotistical men. Regardless, that's what they did. Okay? Now, over time, you know, then immediately, as soon as they got that thing ratified, they went right into legislating, creating statutes, right? Bam, bam, bam. The Judiciary Act, 1789. I mean, that thing wasn't, that ink wasn't even dry on that document yet, and they were already legislating. There were bigger plans. So the Constitution never intended to include the people, any people, except for the people that were the United States. You know, the people that had the wealth and the money, who wanted to obviously control and create a structure and take over. I mean, let's face it. How did they get it from the sovereign Native American nations? They stole it under fraud. Here, sign here. Let's look at this realistically. They came in, okay, and did all these treaties with a group of human beings that didn't even know how to read and write. Didn't understand the language. These white men were aliens to them. They're like, what the hell? They came over in this big wooden thing. It was just like a spaceship to them at the time. And they get them to put their mark on some piece of paper. And they go, oh, I think you agreed. I mean, what kind of bullshit is that? You know? So anyway, let's get to the Constitution and both sides of the fence. You know, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, well, the Constitution doesn't apply to me 100%, or, you know, it's bullshit and I don't need to use that thing and blah, 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 blah. Because the one thing I've learned is you must know both sides. You must know the public side and the private side, the statutory and the natural law and the private common law and all of that. So you've got to know both sides of the fence. You know, you can't just run around and think that you're a free man, you do whatever you want, law doesn't apply to you. You can, I mean, knock yourself out. You know, it's a hard road. So the Constitution does give us some footing when we have the right standing. And the Constitution clearly lays out, okay, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, clearly lays out the jurisdiction of the United States. Okay, that was a loophole. That's an expansion clause in there. Okay, because they have exclusive legislate. They can exclusively legislate, meaning they can exclusively create laws without anybody's approval, really. But it's another story. Only for this area, and that area is, it says right in there, the 10-mile square, the military bases and arsenals, property ceded to it, land ceded to it by the state legislature, meaning it had to be approved by the state and sold to the United States, and all that has to be documented, and then they would have the right to apply their legislation, which means, you know, IRS laws, licensing, permitting, you know, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms laws, all that stuff. Anything federal can only apply in those areas unless it's in the rest of the Constitution, which is interstate commerce, providing for the general defense, things like that, you know. Again, that's why the militaries or the arsenal, military bases, arsenals, and things like that were included in that clause, because they're to provide for our common defense, right? So other than those enumerated duties in that Constitution. They cannot apply their 8,000,000 United States Code laws anywhere but in that area, unless once the 14th Amendment came in, one is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So fast forward up to the 14th Amendment, okay, and they clearly state that one must be born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction thereof to become a U.S. citizen, which it also says, and is a citizen of the state wherein they reside. So it tells you there's two citizenships, all right, and there's a clear amount of evidence that shows, court cases, the whole nine, that the United States is not the United States of America. And this is one of the, I feel, one of the first things people really have to understand, okay? Because then you need to understand whose side of the fence you're on at all times. That's not going to make it easy. That doesn't mean you can just roll out and, you know, start telling police officers and things like that, I'm not a U.S. citizen, and they're going to respect you, because they're not, because you're dealing with ignorance, you know. It's up to you how you operate, and you must operate in peace. That's, if you're not operating in peace and you're going at it in war, you're going to get hurt. You know, somebody's going to get hurt, and it's probably going to be you. Operating in peace is hard, especially when someone's attacking you. Trust me. So if people can understand their jurisdictional standing, that's first. But there's also a process of applying that and getting out from all those times you affirmed that you are a U.S. citizen, because you have multiple times throughout your life. Granted, you've done it under ignorance, okay? Yes, it's trickery, but there's no, I shouldn't say there's no way for you to prove fraud, but fraud is a tough thing, you know, especially when these guys totally, you know, have plausible deniability, you know. So understanding your jurisdiction is really, really important, okay? State citizenship, citizenship. You're on a ship. That ship is going into port, into United States waters, okay? In the United States citizenship. So you got two ships out there, okay? And then one comes over and is managing the other ship, or the fleet of ships, which is the United States of America. But you jump off that boat of the United States of America and you jump onto the other ship, the United States, they got control over you. You know, the captain controls the ship. So in the States, it's a republic form of government. In the United States, it's a democracy. So in the States, there's a whole lot of protection, you know. But that's why they overlaid everything to be the United States, and they do it by consent and by illusionary boundaries, you know, zip codes, you know, the abbreviation. You know, states are abbreviated in 3 letters, upper and lowercase. That's the real state. The new abbreviation of the both uppercase letters is the overlay, the federal overlay, you know. Remember, they paid somebody, the federal government paid someone, a company, a research firm, you know, to come up with those and to come up with a system of zip codes. So therefore, they have ownership, you know, right and title to those abbreviations and zip codes. That's why it's important to know where you live in your body and where you're domiciled on the land of the state. That's why I always point out the Government Printing Office Style Manual 5.23, because it lists your nationality. Under Section 5.23 in Chapter 5, it lists your nationality. So what more do we need? You know, there's my nationality. I was born in New Jersey. I'm a New Jerseyan. You a U.S. citizen? No, I'm not. I went to the passport office and, the ladies in there tried to give me a wrath of shit. Not a wrath of shit, but they didn't understand why I wanted a new passport instead of just renewing my old one, because you have 5 years after your passport expires to renew it. I said, well, my status has changed. And I knew saying that where I was going. I'm not stupid. I knew that as soon as I said that, it's going to be, okay, education time. So the woman goes, well, I don't understand. What do you mean what status? I said, well, I'm not a U.S. citizen anymore. She's like, oh, well, then how are you getting a passport? I said, well, I'm a non-citizen national. I said, look. So I pulled out the application. I showed her the oath on there, or the penalty of perjury sworn declaration. And I said, look, right there, see? U.S. citizen or non-citizen national. So now I'm a non-citizen national, so I have to have the passport changed. And the woman says, well, I've never seen anything like this. I don't understand. We got to take it over to so-and-so here. I'm like, that's fine. Let's go over to so-and-so. So we go over there, and that woman is like, frazzled. She's been working all day, doesn't even want to deal with it, which is great. It works for me because I can use that. Slide it right in there. So they said, oh, well, you're going to have to put a note on here because I'm sorry, but they're just not going to know what you mean. I'm like, well, yes, they will, because it's checked off on there that I'm not a U.S. citizen. So they can't issue me something for a U.S. citizen when I have clearly sworn under penalty of perjury that I'm not. Oh, well, you're going to need to write a note. Fine. Not a problem. Oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. Very sweet, very kind, and these women were not happy, but that's okay. I was, no problem. Gotcha. How much is it going to be to expedite this? They give me all the fees and everything. I go run out to my car and get my checkbook. So I run out to the car, and meanwhile, I'm thinking, what am I going to put in this note? I want to put some powerful stuff in this note. All of what I'm talking about here to declare my citizenship. So I go out to the car, and I pull my computer out. Now, I don't keep any files on my computer. So I plug in my hard drive, and it won't connect. I cannot get to my files. There's no way for me to look up some information to jot down real quick that I feel is really pertinent and solid in this little handwritten letter I'm going to put in there. So I basically took that as a sign from my guy to say, you know what, now's not the time for the passport. And I left. I just didn't go back. I know there's procedures and processes on the internet that you can buy from people about your passport and how to add documents to it and all, but there's also clear evidence that you don't need that. So I was going that route first. But my guides, in the way that I understand my own spirituality, I don't want to get into religion and spirituality. Everybody has a right to their own. But the way that I see it is, when something is not going to be in my best interest, I get messages in the form of physicality of resistance, meaning things aren't working right. And if they're not working right, that's telling me this is not the right time, this is not the right direction. And that's what happened. So I veered off. So now I will type up a new affidavit, clearly stating all the facts, sign on it, get it recorded with it, and cross-index it to the rest of my record in Lamar County, Georgia, have them send me certified copies, and then I will authenticate those with the Secretary of State of Georgia, so I have authenticated copies. And I will take that and my ratification of the Declaration of Independence all in one, and I will have that sent in with this. So they want a letter, they'll get a letter. They'll get much more than a letter. They'll get authenticated sworn declarations, which are much more than a letter. Okay. What I'm meaning to explain here is, when you know which side of the fence you stand on and the facts, and they're here, and you've put them here and here, you know them, you've committed to them, explaining this to people becomes easier, because you don't worry that they're going to look at you like a lunatic. At least I don't. I don't worry that they're going to look at me like a lunatic. I just think that I'm standing my ground. I'm going to make you look like the uneducated one. And it's not hard. All you got to do is speak with some, knowledge of this thing, of this stuff, And these are facts. They can't rebut the facts. So they start looking like bumbling idiots, you know? And it's like, I'm just telling you the facts. You know, I'm not here to argue. You should look into it, Mr. and Mrs. Jones working for the man. You should look into it. Probably learn something, you know? So again, the point is, you know, the Constitution creates this entire jurisdictional conundrum of one jurisdiction and another jurisdiction where they have, one has taken over the other, you know, completely, all by ignorance, you know, all by sleight of hand. You know, the hand is quicker than the eye, all by distracting the people so that they're focused on all these other things rather than really educating themselves, because they're not going to educate you on their trickery. Just face it, you know. They're just going to remove the education. The more they remove it, the further you get away from it. Now we're at this point in history where, oh shit, we're waking up. We've got the internet. We now have information at our fingertips, you know. So anyhow, the Constitution is important. I don't care who says it's not. You know, I guarantee you that person that says it's not has never had to face something in court or some sort of situation where they've actually applied some of the concepts that the Constitution does provide for us here. And there are other documents in other countries. A lot of people that may see this from another country, most likely if you're a civil law or common law country, you have documents that state similar things. Okay, and there's a few key points in this Constitution. There's quite a few, but we're only going to look at a few really relevant points that I use for myself and natural person type entities, which Massachusetts Trust is a natural person for all intents and purposes, okay? All the other trusts are artificial, right? So some of the basic points, okay? You have a right to contract. Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution says that the state cannot impair or impede the obligation of a contract. What does that mean? That means if you have an obligation under a contract between you and another man or woman, private man, private woman, the state's got no business in it. Okay? They can't do anything to impede that obligation, provided you're not breaking any laws. You see, and that's where they try to, you know, insert their jurisdiction, because they go, oh, you're breaking some state laws by doing this, that, or the other. Wait a minute, that doesn't apply here, because I need to know which state we're talking about. Are we talking about the state of, or are we talking about the state? Are we talking about the republic state that doesn't get funding from the United States, or are we talking about the state of the democracy that does get funding from the United States, meaning they're basically one and the same? Which state? Like, we get into that first, right? Then we go, okay, well, what gives the state the right to impair my obligation to expand the corpus of this trust? Okay, which is, again, Massachusetts trust, private contracts, a contract before it's a trust, which is why it's different than a lot of these other trusts that people think are the greatest thing under the sun. It's not set up right. It's not, okay? So where can the state come in and impair or impede the obligation of the trust? That's first. You also have, in that same clause, Article 1, Section 10, the real money thing that everybody talks about, the gold and silver, okay? It doesn't necessarily say that gold and silver is the real money. What it says is it's the only tender in the payment of debts, that the states shall make only gold and silver the tender in the payment of debts, okay? So that means, again, if you're using commercial paper as legal tender, that's against the Constitution, because the state can't make anything other than gold and silver a payment in the tender of debts. So if the United States comes in and issues a piece of paper, a negotiable or a non-negotiable promissory note, as money to pay a debt, which it is a debt because it's a promissory note, all of that is completely unlawful. And if I use it, I'm committing a fraud unless I'm a U.S. citizen, now that obligation of that note becomes mine. Okay? So that's why it's important to be careful with money, because someone else owns it, someone else has right, title, and interest to it, and it's not really money. It's debt. Okay? So we have to establish all of these, guidelines and this standing of being a state citizen outside of the United States. That's why I always promote your declaration should have a sworn, an oath on it, a penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States of America without the United States. You don't even have to write without the United States. I see a lot of people doing that, but as long as you cite, I put 28 USC 1746(1) after it, they know you don't have to say without the United States. The actual writing of that penalty of perjury statute doesn't say in it without the United States. It says to administer an oath without the United States, or to swear and leave the United States out, write it this way. That's basically what they're saying. Okay. So it's very, very important to make sure you know that you are a state citizen and how to apply that. Okay. The use of a federal benefit or the acceptance of a federal benefit puts you back in the United States, the 10-mile square, Washington, D.C., the arsenals, military bases, national parks, minor outlying islands, possessions. That's where you live. If you agree that you have a Social Security card, which is why Social Security cards should not be used for identification. Okay? Now, if you think about that, there's ways around that, okay, in my opinion. Because the Social Security card doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the entity that was created by two people out of wedlock. All right. So my parents, at least, they didn't have the same last name on the certificate of live birth, so how could they have been married? That's another part of the trickery. But anyway, not to go too far down that rabbit hole. So you have your citizenship is state citizenship if you live here. I think Canada, you're provincial, I believe. Other countries, you're going to have to read your documents, your founding documents, or your constitutions, or whatever their bylaws are, and see where it is for you. I haven't researched other countries because I'm still 10 years into ours. I'd love to meet some forerunners in their countries that have found the stuff and have effectively used it, because that would help a lot of people. So again, your right to private contract, money. What does it say in the 7th Amendment? It says that any controversy over $20 should be held by a court of common law, okay, in a common law jurisdiction, and has a right to a jury trial. Well, there's no common law jurisdiction. How are they going to give that to you? However, there's also no money. So how are they going to give it to you with no money if you can never get $21, a controversy over $20? You can't say, oh, this is a controversy over $20 because I lent, Joe Schmo down the street $5,000 and he didn't pay me back. Can't use that either, because it's not money, which is why 21 silver dollars is important. But in order to use 21 silver dollars, you have to have some sort of controversy at $21. That's what the law says, a controversy exceeding $20. So there has to be a controversy. So it's not hard to create a controversy, okay? So that's another protection in there, very important protection. So just to recap, you got Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, which lays out the jurisdiction of the United States as opposed to the United States of America. All right, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. You've got Article 1, Section 10 that lists that money or gold and silver rather, is the only tender in the payment of debts. And it also states that the state cannot impair or impede an obligation of a contract. So that's your private contract article right there. Okay, Article 1, Section 10. All right, then you have the 14th Amendment. Well, let's back up. The 7th Amendment, which gives you the right to common law court and jury in a controversy exceeding $20. I know there's other amendments that are important. I'm just sticking to a few of these, okay, which sets you up. If you look at these and you build a structure off of these, you know, you're setting yourself up before shit happens, okay? That's my whole deal here, is I try to set myself up before shit happens. And I may be dealing with some shit here soon, so rubber meets the road, you know? I've dealt with some shit before when I wasn't set up, and I still was able to really make things happen. But now's a different story, so rubber to the road, you know. Anyway, so we're on the 7th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment, again, creates a federal citizen, literally a federal citizen. It creates another citizen. And that's where you find your difference in the federal citizenship versus the state citizenship. Okay, and that's your evidence right there that there is in fact two, okay, citizenships. So I get a lot of people who say, again, the Constitution and all that's a bunch of bullshit, it doesn't matter, and blah 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 blah. Okay, I totally understand what they're talking about. I agree on a higher level. Okay, however, I'm also a big fan of knowing both sides of things. You know, yes, I know the spiritual hierarchy thing and that we're free beings and all that stuff, and what man wrote this paper. I'm all for it, by the way. However, you're not going to go into that system and try to tell them that and expect them to just bow down and respect it. It's not going to happen. You know, I don't want to say that. That's wrong. It can happen, you know, but if they want you bad enough for something, whatever it may be, even though you didn't harm or injure anyone, they're going to get you, and that shit's not going to work, okay? Not unless you have some records, documented stuff, equitable procedures, notice, okay, where you can show that these parties that are trying to come against you, either the state or the Fed, have failed in their obligation to respond to you. Okay, now one of the things that I observed when I was on the stand in federal court testifying, okay, was when the prosecutor was examining me, said, you know, did you send these notices out? And I said, yeah, I sent notices out. And he said, and who did you send these to? And I said, well, lots of agencies and things. It's my understanding that I should notice my brother in peace, so that way they know what my intentions are, and everybody's notified. And he said, well, how many of these notices did you send out? I said, well, roughly about 225 of them. And of course, then the jury and everybody was like, ooh, 225? And I said, yeah. And out of 225, no one responded and told me it was against the law. I gave them my name. I told them how to get a hold of me, everything. I even gave them my picture. And no one said it was against the law. And that broke the whole fucking thing. Their whole machine just broke right down right there. Bam. I could see the prosecutors, you know, their faces just, oh, we just lost everything. You damn well did. Because out of 225 of you, nobody did their job. Nobody came and said this was illegal. So, you know, it's very important. Notice is very, very important. It's not enough to just make a record. It's not enough to just put an affidavit out there. It isn't. Okay, two entities that have to be noticed: the public at large, as a whole, if we want to call it an entity. It's not really an entity, but the public at large. Okay, and then the public administrative system. That's why I always do direct notice to the administrative system, notice in a newspaper. Okay, and I don't do a whole lot of legal notices in the newspaper. There's only certain pertinent things I need to do and put in there. So again, establishing your jurisdiction is super, super important, but it's not enough to just write it. It's not enough to just notice either. You have to stand on it. That's why they call it standing. You have to stand on it. You know, what are you going to stand on? I mean, if I went into that passport office and I didn't stand on what I knew, and I got all, you know, nervous, and I didn't know what to explain, they're going to look at me like, this is awfully fishy. While they did think it was awfully interesting, they didn't think anything was fishy because I was firm and solid and wasn't moving off of my standing. You weren't going to knock me off my footing. This is the truth. These are facts. So do what you got to do with paper. I don't care what you do. Your job is not my job. Your procedures are not my problem. I know I've done my due diligence. Now it's time for you to do yours. You know, but if you start stumbling and stuttering and nervous and scared, yeah, they're gonna push you over. You know, you gotta have some fortitude, man. You know, have a little pride. You know, stand up for yourself, even if you're scared to death. There's been many times. I mean, you know, when I went into court to counsel for someone for the first time, you don't think I was scared? Fuck. I didn't sleep, man. I didn't sleep for days leading up to that. Days. You know, I remember the night before, I felt like I was praying in the garden. You know, I was scared to death to go into court and do something that no one has really done, especially in such a communistic state as Maryland. I mean, come on, you know, that's where all the politicians are. Maryland, Virginia, Northern Virginia. I mean, Christ, man, that was, you know, I was scared to death, but I didn't let them see that. You know, I still stood my ground. I still stood my jurisdiction. You know, all these things we create, trusts, ministries, whatever, PMAs, it's all well and good. But let me tell you something. If they come knocking on your door, sending you notices, and all of that, that's when it really matters. I'm not saying that's going to happen to anyone. I'm not saying you should be fearful of it. All I try to do is get people to understand that structuring and yourself correctly and standing is very important. Notice is important. You know, you run around on public property in areas where there's your neighbor, you know, and you're running around doing your thing and you harm someone, even if it's by accident, you didn't give any notice of what thing you're doing, you know, so that person could properly protect themselves from the thing that you're doing, and you just created an injury. Now, whether you intended to is where it gets into a crime or not. If you intended to create the injury, then that's a crime. But if you didn't intend to, then that's an accident, but you still have to make the other person whole. Okay? You can't run around lawless. You can't. You know? Even divine law is in order that way. You know? For every action, there's a reaction. You know? Equal and opposite reaction, too. You know? It's, you know, so if you harm someone, then you need to make them whole. That's the reaction, you know. It's not a problem. I'm sorry. How can I help you? How can I fix this? How can I make it right? You know, I didn't mean to harm you. It was an accident. But notice is important, so you give the other party an opportunity to protect themselves from whatever it is you're doing if they disagree. That's only fair, you know. It's like I could knock on my neighbor's door and say, hey, I'm going to light this fire on our border here of both of our properties. You know, you cool with that? No, I'm not. Could you please do it on the other side of your property? I don't want mine burning down. Okay, sure. Or you could be, there's people out there that aren't like that, and screw you, it's my property, I'm going to do what I want. Fine, do what you want. But I've already told you, if that fire comes over here, you're paying for it. You know, that's what notice is about. Now, if you don't give notice and you just light that fire and you go ahead and injure him, you're going to pay for it anyway. You know, but at least if you notice the man, you gave the man an opportunity to speak up and say, no, I disagree. And you're showing that you're taking responsibility, and you're also taking liability, you know, which is why all these entities try to limit their liability. There's no equity in no liability. If you don't have any liability, you don't have any equity. You know? So it's important. It's important to know your jurisdiction and your standing, your citizenship. You know, eventually I think humanity will move past that. But at this point in time, and for the next 40, 50 years, it's important. You know, and I hope to see the dawn of the day when this stuff does start to go away in my lifetime. That would be beautiful, you know. But until then, we really need to protect ourselves by, you know, being at peace and knowledgeable, you know, unemotional, it's just business, unemotional, factual. We know what the facts are, you know, we're educated, you know, we're not angry, we're not sovereigns. We're not sovereigns. Let's get rid of that, okay? First off, I totally agree with Carlton Weiss. If you want to be a sovereign, you better follow what they consider to be a sovereign, okay? And that means you've got enough ammunition and enough weapons to guard your fortress that has to have a border around it that's protected by a militia. Okay, these are the definitions. These are what defines a sovereign. If you don't have that, you're not a sovereign. Okay? Now, let's not get that confused with spiritual sovereignty. That's different. Okay? But anybody that goes around calls themselves a sovereign in the law is asking for trouble. You are. You don't have to say I'm a sovereign to insert that you're a king or a queen on the land. You don't need that. There's enough ways to say it that they can't hold against you. Sovereign citizen has been created by them as another way to label you a domestic terrorist. So the more you call yourself a sovereign, the more you agree with them that you're who they want to lock up. You know? And again, I really feel that whole structure is falling apart, yes. But we've got a lot of time before that's gone. And we still have two factions that are fighting it out real hardcore right now, you know, to maintain that grip. And their structures are still in place, you know. So if we're going to really do something outside the box, then we need to have the fortitude and the knowledge to do it and not be afraid and know that we're protected. You know, protection is not just spiritual, you know, it's temporal as well, or of the earth, you know. So, you know, the Constitution is important, whether you think it is or not. And you don't have a right to assert constitutional provisions. If you're a U.S. citizen, you don't have that right. So don't go into a court thinking you do, because you don't. If you have to face a court or a legal matter, because you don't, unless you're a state citizen and you've corrected your status. That's the only time, you know. And I think the passport, doing the proper passport procedure again helps you with that, because you know you have now put in their record that you're a state citizen, and yes, they do mark that, you know, but it's got to be done correctly. I'm working on that myself. I've seen it, you know. Copper moonshine still is one of the best ways. Everybody on the internet that is doing a passport procedure probably stole it from them, because they've been doing it a long time, and it's very accurate. So, you know, don't just buy anybody's process without understanding what you're doing. You know, there's no golden goose, everybody. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's no accessing your hidden account to one day be rich and never have to work again. You know, working is the way of the world. If you're not being productive, you're not going to get anything. That's just the bottom line. Okay, you can't sit on a couch all day and do nothing and not contribute to society. I mean, you can, but you better accept what's coming with that and figure out how you're going to, you know, eat and live and have shelter and all of that. That's fine. If you can do it, I'm not saying that it's impossible. But I'm saying if you think you're going to get a pot of gold and live in a lap of luxury and you're not producing anything, it doesn't work that way. The universe doesn't work that way. You get what you create. You know, you're not putting any energy out, you're not going to get any energy back. You know, so I don't promote the UCC, you know, redemption, save yourself with gold, or say, you know, access your account and, you know, just do this paperwork and they have to give you access to your account. And I'll tell you something, they don't have to do shit, and they won't. You know, leave the pot of gold with them and create your own. That's really what is important, you know. And if gold and silver under Article 1, Section 10 is the only tender in the payment of debts, well, then start acquiring some. Because the 7th Amendment says any controversy exceeding $20 has a right to common law court, common law jury. And they don't have any, for the most part. So, you know, get yourself some gold and silver. Doesn't take much. You know, you go out, you spend money on eating out, or, you know, doing these things for yourself, whatever it may be, whatever you do. But if it's not gold and silver, you're kind of wasting your money. You're wasting your debt. You should take that debt and turn it into something of value. Now, I'm not saying that personal items and things like that don't have value. Of course they have value, but do they have value in the world? Do they have value to everyone else? You know, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But gold and silver is universally accepted as something of pure value. So, fund yourself, because the Constitution was put in place for a bankrupt nation, because it is a bankruptcy charter. It is a bankruptcy document. It is a bankruptcy trust. That's why it was put in place, so that the nation could function under bankruptcy, you know? And every time they try to come out of bankruptcy, we have some sort of catastrophic event. I've explained this before. Every 70 years, okay, bankruptcy for a country is forgiven, debt forgiveness, every 70 years. So let's go over it again. 1790, the Constitution, 1789, it's put into place, 1789 or 1790 roughly, okay? 70 years later, the Civil War, 1860. Okay, 70 years later, after the Civil War, we're ready to come out of bankruptcy again after 70 years. We're there. 1930 stock market crash. No, we're not. We're back in bankruptcy. You know, another 70 years plus 1 year. You know, after 1930, we're ready to come out of bankruptcy again. Here we go. No, we're not. 9/11. You know, it's so blatantly obvious that they need to keep the country in bankruptcy. Okay. However, if you have gold and silver, you're not bankrupt. You're not bankrupt. You're not insolvent. Your entity, your birth entity, is no longer insolvent. But you have to know how to apply, and you got to have the right jurisdiction. You can't run around as a U.S. citizen expecting to use private law as a defense or an offense. It's not going to happen. And there are several ways that they will trick you. There's multiple ways they will trick you into making you agree that you're a U.S. citizen. And it doesn't matter if it's trickery or not, they're going to use it. So you've got to be on your game all the time. Who are you talking to? What are they asking you? What are they really looking for? What information do you by law have to give someone? That's an easy one. None. You don't have to give information. There's no law that says you have to give any information. So why are you giving it? Just because somebody's got a badge on and says, well, I'm the authority. Tell me this, that, or the other. And you're going to go, oh, okay, here, let me tell you everything you can use against me. Because that is what they do. That's why they used to say anything you do and say can and will be held against you. They don't say that anymore. They just do it. Okay? But under Miranda versus Arizona, they had to say that until they brought in the Patriot Act and did away with that, because you're all terrorists at this point. Every U.S. citizen is a suspected domestic terrorist, you know. So it's very important to know your citizenship, and it's very important to correct those records. Everything financial that you're going to get into is because you're a U.S. citizen. You're not a state citizen. You're acting in bankruptcy, and you have no right to have money. Okay? But if you're a state citizen, you have a right to have real money, which is gold and silver. But if you are a federal United States citizen using Federal Reserve notes, you do not have a right. And don't think that you do. You can think that you do all you want until shit hits the fan. Then you go, oh, I better run to an attorney. And what's the attorney's job, folks? I know many of you know. You know, it's in the law encyclopedia on every attorney's bookshelf, corpus juris secundum, under the heading or the title of attorney. It says the attorney's first allegiance is to the court, second to the state, third to you. So you're not going to get any rights, you know, simply because the word attorn means to transfer rights from the tenant to the landlord. So if someone's attorneying for you, an attorney, you just gave up all your rights to hire this person who is going to charge you an astronomical amount of money to get into a fight. That's all he's going to do. You know, and he's going to walk over there and he's going to throw his hands up like this, and he's going to take a couple punches that look great for you. Look at this, bang! Oh, he's going to take a couple, and at the end of the day, he's always going to lose. Always. It's just how it works. You know? The only way to have any kind of rights is to have them in your own right, you know, impropria persona, you know, sui juris, a man in his own right, impropria persona. I'm here in my proper person, you know, I'm not here in another person. And when you do that, you'll see that the court will try to change you to pro se. So that's how you know impropria persona is powerful, because they'll try to change it on you. Every time, you know, every time. So knowing your standing, your jurisdiction, which the Constitution lays out for you perfectly, is very important. Even though people say the Constitution is bullshit. You know, in this freedom patriot movement, there's a lot of angry people. They're upset. They're pissed off. That's the wrong way to go, man. Trust me. You know, it's the wrong way to go. Been there, done that, paid for it, you know, realized that the opposite was the way to go. Always, always the way to go. You know, when I had a judge try to arrest me several times in court because I was just merely helping my friend as counsel for them, that I wasn't even part of the case. I had nothing to do with the controversy. I was just acting as counsel, you know, but you know, the court said I need a license, and I quickly proved them wrong that they didn't, that I did need a license because I'm not practicing any law. And if I'm doing anything with law at all, I'm applying it, and that the state can't license the practice of law. You know, I hit him with all that, bam, 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 shut the judge right down. So he got pissed. And when he got pissed, what did he start doing? You know, I'll take you in the country. And he starts blowing up, right? He's, you know, so I said, whoa, 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 hey, wait a minute. I come here in peace, in honor, with dignity and respect, and you're yelling at me like a terrorist? You're terrorizing me, a member of the public? And that dude went from to I mean, like that. Bam, he was dead. I'm sorry, and apologized to me. The judge, you know, not on one occasion, but every time. Because the key is I'm in peace and honor here. I don't know why you're getting angry and upset or emotional or threatening me. You know, I'm not an enemy. Bam, shuts it right down. If you're ever in a situation, I mean, again, I do not promote anybody going into court. I know how these guys are. If you have an issue, they're going to drag you, so to speak. But I don't promote going into court. And if you absolutely must go into court, you must go in under special appearance and not general. And you should study what special appearance is rather than general if you're going to do that. You know, again, I'm not advising you to do one way or the other. What I'm saying is I would do that. It's very important to know the difference. I don't give legal advice. I just give you information. You know, and again, you know, general and special appearance is an important concept, a legal concept that you should understand if you're going to go in there and try to battle something out, which to me is no good. You know, alternative dispute resolution is where it's at, because that's neutral, that's peaceful, that's not a battle. It even says it right in the law encyclopedia. Look up alternative dispute resolution, and it says going into court is a virtual battlefield. It is about war. So all court actions are war. Okay? Alternative dispute resolution behind the scenes is peaceful. Making a special appearance is going out to the battlefield with a white flag up and saying, hey, you know, I'm at peace. A white flag is peace. It's not surrender, like they try to get us all to believe that it's cowardly to put up a flag because you've surrendered. No, the white flag means I'm at peace. So I'm coming out on the battlefield in peace, and I'm saying, hey, I'm appearing specially here because I'm not fighting with any of y'all. I got no dog in the fight. All this, the way it's set up, everybody says, oh, they're not following the law. They are following the law. They've been masterminds at the loopholes. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 is a loophole. It is an expansive clause. It expands the jurisdiction of the United States over the states and makes us all susceptible to those laws. Okay? If we agree that we're a U.S. citizen. The problem is we've all agreed from birth till today if we haven't changed and corrected that. And that's what I try to help people understand. You know, you can correct that by sworn declarations on the record. Okay, you can correct that status by having a notary, which is an officer under the Secretary of State, okay, that can legally give oaths of office or oaths to a witness. That's why a notary is important, you know. But I still do two witnesses. I bring two witnesses with me in front of a notary when I can. They sign, and then I put my notary in the box. Okay, because it's not part of the notary, is not part of the document. And I put my own oath on there, 1746-1, Title 28, 1746-1, is in fact in place of a notary. Okay, so you can do that. That's a self-executing oath, but I do both because I don't want any, you know, I'm going to make it as solid as possible. So a lot of times I'll do both. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. It's been an hour. Understanding the role of the Constitution, your citizenship is very important. State citizen, always, 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 whatever state you live in. If you need to know what your citizenship is, look it up. Type in Government Printing Office Style Manual, okay, Chapter 5, Section 5.23 under nationalities, and it will tell you that is the way you spell your nationality. I've seen some people just willy-nilly put like New Jersey in, you know, where they spell Jersey in J-E-R-S-I-A-N or something like that, or Y-I-A-N, something that's wrong. You know, it's J-E-R-S-E-Y-A-N, you know, New Jerseyan, things like that. You have to look it up because that's the way that they style the nationalities in all of their laws, if you even find it in there, but they have to style it that way. So that's why you use that manual. Okay, section 5.23, know your citizenship. You know, do not expatriate from the United States of America. That is wrong. Completely wrong. Don't do that. You need protection. So you expatriate from the United States, but you remain your allegiance to the state, okay? So how do you do that? There has to be a declaration under the Secretary of State, okay? So a notary. So you do an oath of allegiance to the state. I know some people are saying, hell no, I don't do any oaths of allegiance. I get it. I don't want to do it either. So I always make sure that my first allegiance is to God, okay? My secular allegiance is to the people of the republic of the state wherein I was born. So my allegiance is to my neighbor. You know what I'm saying? In that state. So I word mine in such a way that gets both points across, that I'm nobody's bitch. You know, at the same time, my allegiance is to the state where I was born, so to speak, and not to the United States. You know, so I draw up my affidavit of allegiance, and I do that, and I get that notarized, witnessed, whatever, you know, put it on the public record, bam, 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 do my process. My process is always to create a declaration under oath, okay, and then to record that in the public record. And if I feel it's necessary, I put it in the newspaper, okay, and I take my state created record or my state recorded record, and I have that certified, and then I have that authenticated so that I can put that into a case if ever need be, or send it out if need be, okay, as authenticated certified records. That's my process for just about everything, you know, because it all starts with standing and it all starts with that record, all right? So that's where I get my right to private contract, you know, which is Article 1, Section 10. The state cannot impair or impede the obligation of a contract. You know, that is where I get my right to use gold and silver, you know, in the tender of payment of debts under Article 1, Section 10. It's where the jurisdiction is established in the 14th Amendment of the state citizen, not the federal. You know, all of that is established by record, okay? So anyhow, that's what's up. That's how I view things. This is not legal advice. You know, nobody should take it and go and try to handle their debt and all that crap with it if they don't know what they're doing. What I do is not what you do. What you do is not what I do. So anyway, I hope there is enough in here to help some of the new people understand, you know, the power of why the Constitution can help you and where it applies and where it doesn't. It can't help you if you haven't corrected your status, so don't think about that either, because you will get shut down, okay? So anyhow, bless y'all. I'll check y'all out later. I got lots of work to do, so happy Sunday. All right, everybody. Let me find the end video here. Here it is. Say yeah.